Johnny Talk Sports in with the Week 10 college football predictions. What a Week 9 we had. We had Michigan State pull off an upset against Michigan despite being nearly a 4-touchdown underdog. And what a way to respond after getting embarrassed by Rutgers in your season opener. And for the 6th week in a row, a top 10 team upset by a non-top 10 opponent. And this week, it was Oklahoma State. They were number 6 in the country, and they lost to Texas in overtime. Huge credit to the Longhorns, though. They salvaged their season, and I think that saved Tom Herman's job. Because Tom Herman, I feel like, was on the hot seat going into this game. And I felt like if they lost that game, it was going to define the rest of their season and define whether or not they're going to make changes within their coaching staff in the offseason. So that is a huge confidence booster for Texas moving forward towards the end of their season. And what a Week 10 we're in store for. We've got 2 top 10 matchups. We've got number 5 Georgia and number 8 Florida. And we have the game of the season between number 1 Clemson and number 4 Notre Dame. Clemson will be without starting quarterback Trevor Lawerence for the 2nd game in a row. And also we have the Pac-12 starting their season this week. So without further ado, let's get right into the Week 10 college football predictions. Our first game is a Friday night game. And on Friday night, we will have number 9 BYU taking on number 21 Boise State. We have had 6 consecutive weeks where a top 10 team loses to a non-top 10 opponent. Could BYU be that team this week? I think many suspect that it's possible. For Boise State, they are averaging 45.5 points per game in their first 2 games of the season, but they are against Utah State and Air Force. Well, for BYU, on the other hand, you could say that BYU hasn't played any tough competition so far this season either. They are averaging 44.4 points per game, which is 4th in the FBS. They are only allowing 13.4 points per game, which is 9th in the FBS. So BYU has a top 5 scoring offense and a top 10 scoring defense. And their scoring offense, 44.4 points per game. That is on the level of Alabama and Clemson and even Ohio State. And Zach Wilson, he's putting on a Heisman-type season, completing 74.6% of his passes for 2,152 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And he has also accounted for 7 rushing touchdowns this season. And that is just 1/3 of the BYU rushing attack, led by Tyler Algier and Lupine Katoa, are leading the way in the BYU running game. For Boise State, who will be the quarterback in this matchup? Will it be Hank Bachmeier or will it be Jack Sears? Jack Sears did get the start last week as Hank Bachmeier did not play in that game. In fact, he did not travel with the team, but it is for unknown reasons. So it's hard to say he's going to be the quarterback for Boise State, although I do give the quarterback edge to BYU anyways. Although we did see some flashes of Hank Bachmeier last season against Florida State, as many thought, including myself, he could be that next great group of 5 quarterback. But I'm going to pick BYU in this matchup. I just think BYU is going to utilize their running attack, and they're going to keep the Boise State offense on the sidelines. BYU is going to sustain drives. They're going to take their time with their possessions, giving Boise State limited possessions. I think BYU will get the win. And BYU, despite not playing really the strongest competition so far, they did learn to adapt to the triple option against Navy. And how many times have we seen these Power 5 teams really struggle to adapt to the triple option? Army took Michigan and Oklahoma into overtime. Next, we have number 16 Oklahoma State taking on Kansas State. For Kansas State, can Will Howard step up for Skylar Thompson, as Skylar Thompson is out for the season? And I think if this game was between Spencer Sanders and Skylar Thompson, I would pick Kansas State to pull off the upset. But Kansas State, they got to assert their running game. They've got to assert how they pull off the upset against Oklahoma 2 years in a row with their running game, led by Deuce Vaughn and Harry Trotter. As Kansas State's rush offense is 84th in the FBS, only averaging 114.5 rushing yards per game. Oklahoma State, they are looking to bounce back from their first loss of the season. And ultimately, trying to give that last glimmer of hope for the Big 12 to get to the College Football Playoff. I know that many think that the Big 12's hopes of the College Football Playoffs are dead in the water. I don't think so. I think if Oklahoma State were to win out, and if Tulsa were to win out, because if they were to have Tulsa win out, then they would have they'd have a win over a top 25 team. Maybe, depending on if they really win out, maybe even top 15, top 12, because they have Cincinnati on their schedule still. So if they can pull off an upset against Cincinnati, they could definitely have an argument. Still got to take on Bedlam. They still have the Big 12 championship game. If they were to get there, they'd have to be the Big 12 champions to have a case. But I think Oklahoma State will get their offense going. Chuba Hubbard, I think, has been kind of a disappointment so far this season. But I think he's going to get going this week. I think Oklahoma State's offense is going to get going. And I think Oklahoma State defensively is going to bounce back after losing to Texas in overtime last week. I'm going to pick Oklahoma State to bounce back and respond to the win. And the Big 12's playoff hopes are still alive for at least one more week. Next, we have number 23, Michigan, and number 13, Indiana. I never really thought I would see Indiana in the top 15 in football. But here we are. And they're led by Michael Penix Jr., I think one of the most underappreciated and most underrated quarterbacks, not only in the Big Ten, but I think in the entire country. While Michigan is looking to bounce back coming off with their first loss of the season against Michigan State, as they go up against Michael Penix Jr., I think they could struggle in this game because they got to put away Indiana early. If you don't put away Indiana early, they are going to stay in the game until the very end, and they could eventually beat you. And Penn State learned that the hard way 2 weeks ago. For Michigan, they've got to assert their running game more. They've got to get Hassan Haskins going. They've got to get their entire running game going. And Joe Milton, he's got to be given time to throw the football. A very underachieving performance last week for Michigan. But I think they'll bounce back this week. I do think Indiana will hang in there, though. I think Michael Penix Jr., I think he's capable of leading the Hoosiers to victory, but I just can't see that. I just think their win against Penn State, despite it being deserving, maybe it was at the right time. Considering it was the opening week of the season, nobody knew much about anything, but I think the Don Brown defense is going to be able to contain Michael Penix Jr. I think Michigan will pick up the win, and they'll bounce back, keeping, honestly, their playoff hopes alive. Because if Michigan wins out, which would include a win against Ohio State, a win the Big Ten Championship, Michigan's got an argument for being in one of the 4 teams. And our next game, we have Nebraska and Northwestern, another Big Ten matchup. Nebraska, their game last week against Wisconsin was canceled. No makeup dates in the Big Ten Conference. Honestly, Kevin Warren, he really screwed that whole thing up. He should have started the season earlier because Kevin Warren really failed to look into potential makeup dates. So I do feel bad for Nebraska because I feel like if it wasn't for Nebraska football, I feel like we wouldn't have a football season. Because Nebraska players, they were speaking out about wanting to play this season days and weeks and months before Trevor Lawerence did. The only reason why Trevor Lawerence gets the credit for it is because he's the face of college football at this moment. And Nebraska wanted to play so badly. And they got their wish. And they showed some heart. Despite losing by 35 points, they showed heart against Ohio State. They showed more heart in that game than I think they have in the last 4 years of Nebraska football combined. Well, Northwestern, they are 2-0. They beat Iowa and Maryland so far. Honestly, two of what I think are going to be the bottom feeders of the Big Ten Conference. The difference in this game, though, is going to be the running games. With Nebraska, Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey, even Dedrick Mills. I think if Northwestern were to force Adrian Martinez to have to throw the ball to win the game, I would like Northwestern's chances to win the game. And for Northwestern, their running attack led by Drake Anderson and Isaiah Bowser, I think could be a difference for Northwestern in this game. And as history shows, this game is going to be very close. I think this is going to be a 7-point victory for Nebraska. I just think that with Peyton Ramsey being the quarterback for Northwestern, you've got to take into account and I know that the defense didn't do so well against Ohio State, but despite showing heart, Peyton Ramsey isn't Justin Fields. Peyton Ramsey is going to make mistakes in this game. I mean, Justin Fields is the most efficient quarterback in college football, and he's not. Peyton Ramsey's not Justin Fields. He is not that type of quarterback. I think they're going to force Peyton Ramsey making some mistakes, and they're going to assert the running game of Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey, and even Dedrick Mills. I think Nebraska wins this by 7. Next matchup, number 5 Georgia and number 8 Florida. This is ultimately going to decide the SEC East. For the Bulldogs, they are still in the College Football Playoff race. And for Florida, coming off what I think was quite an emotional victory, although there probably is going to be some suspensions incoming after their actions against Missouri last week. But I think that Georgia hasn't faced, when Georgia faces an offense, when they face the Alabama offense, they got outmanned in the second half. And with Florida, quarterback Kyle Trask, 18 touchdown passes and only 2 interceptions. So a Heisman type of season. Despite having one loss to Texas A&M, I think Florida, if they were to win out, they would be in the college football playoff, no doubt. In fact, if either of these teams won out, they'd be one of the 4. No question about it. Well, Georgia is 51st in total offense in the FBS. So that is something that is quite concerning. Although Florida's defense isn't the best defense, in fact, they were a mediocre defense, I think the Florida defense has gotten a little bit better ever since in these past couple of games they've played. The Florida defense seems to be getting a little bit better every single game. So that's something to look out for, to see if the Florida defense can get better each and every single game moving forward. Florida has the 15th best offense in college football, really led by Kyle Trask, and Kyle Pitts. Georgia, however, is 13th in total defense. But when Georgia plays a decent offense, and if it's an offense like Florida's, I'm very concerned for Georgia moving forward. Georgia's running game is Zamir White and James Cook. I think they're going to be a huge difference in this game, especially in Florida's loss to Texas A&M. They had a hard time stopping Isaiah Spiller in the running game. But I'm going to pick Georgia in this matchup. I do think this game goes either way, though. But I'm going to pick the Bulldogs in this one. Because Florida, they really haven't seemed to been able to take that next step. If Florida can't beat Georgia this year, it's going to be a question mark of when they can actually beat Georgia. Because this year, opportunity knocks. You've got a quarterback that's getting experience. It's having a Heisman-type season in Kyle Trask. On the other side, you have a freshman quarterback, Stetson Bennett, for Georgia, who has played in some high-quality games already this season. And that's why I'm giving Georgia the edge in this matchup, is mainly because of Stetson Bennett being able to adapt to tough competition so far. Because he dominated against Auburn. And also he played Alabama despite not doing so well against Alabama in the second half of the game. Facing a tough team like that, facing tough competition like that, I think gives Georgia the edge. I think that gives Stetson Bennett some confidence. I think Georgia will win this game. I know there are some experts saying that Florida's going to win this game. Even one expert actually said Florida win by at least 10. Just can't see it. I like Georgia in this one. Our first predicted Pac-12 matchup this season is Stanford and number 12 Oregon. Unfortunately, not so much to kind of look into. We haven't seen anything in the Pac-12 yet. So we can only go off of what we've seen last year, at least for the Pac-12, at least throughout the first 2 games. We can only go off what happened last year in this conference. And last year, Stanford, I think this was the worst Stanford football team that I've ever seen. And when we think of Stanford football, we are used to thinking consistency. We are thinking of getting used to 10 win seasons on a consistent basis. And Stanford, they probably would maybe get 11 wins on occasion. But this past season, I think was the worst football season I've ever seen out of Stanford. And for Oregon, we're used to talking about how good their offense is. But last year it was about their defense. And Oregon's defense has really done a complete 180 throughout these past couple of seasons with defensive coordinator Andy Avalos. I think Andy Avalos, it's only a matter of time until he's a head coach. In fact, I were to say that if a Power 5 program opened up this year, whether it's maybe Jim Harbaugh, not that I think Michigan would fire him, but maybe Jim Harbaugh could take an NFL job. Maybe Jim Harbaugh could take the Texans job or the Jets job, even the Falcons job. Or maybe if Texas were to open up. Or maybe even if USC were to open up. Because I think Clay Helton's on the hot seat going into this season. And Tyler Sherrill is going to be the quarterback for the Ducks, taking over for Justin Herbert, who is absolutely doing so well in the NFL so far, but his team is letting him down. And Oregon's defense, I think, is going to be one of the top defenses in college football by this time next season. In fact, if we were playing a full season, a full 12-game season starting on time, I think Oregon would have the best defense in college football. I think they have that potential. I think they have that much talent. And I'm going to pick the Ducks to win this matchup because they still have C.J. Verdell at running back. Despite losing a couple of talent pieces on the offense, they still got enough, I think, to do well this season and possibly get a New Year's 6 bid. So I'm going to go with the Ducks in this matchup. And finally, the game of the week, the game of the season, number 1 Clemson and number 4 Notre Dame. Clemson will be without star quarterback Trevor Lawerence for the second consecutive game, while Notre Dame, this is the toughest opponent they're going to play this season. And I've seen some people already say that Notre Dame is going to pull off the upset. They could, but it's hard to say. This game could go in either direction. I think this game is going to be a defensive slugfest. I think this game is going to be won in the trenches. The difference in this matchup, I think, is going to definitely be the running game. You've got Travis Etienne for Clemson. You've got Kyron Williams for Notre Dame. But one thing that could play in Notre Dame's favor, Clemson may average 46.1 points per game, which is second in the FBS. And Clemson may also only allow an average of 15.6 points per game, which is 11th in the FBS. Clemson may be 7th in total defense. But Notre Dame, they average 34.8 points per game. And they're only allowing 10.3 points per game, which is 4th in the FBS, and it is the best amongst Power 5 teams. And I know it's only for one season, but Notre Dame is a Power 5 team this season. So this game could play in Notre Dame's favor if it is a defensive battle. Because Notre Dame, they have already played a close game against Louisville. Their defense, really a fantastic performance that day, taking on Malik Cunningham. And for Clemson, they will be without Trevor Lawerence in this game, and they're turning to backup quarterback DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback, and he rallied Clemson last week against Boston College after being down by 18 early in that game. They rallied to win by 6. And I think a game like that, I think this does work out in Clemson's favor because they do have, because now DJ Uiagalelei has a game under his belt. I think that if they were to throw him in against Notre Dame this week, I mean, let's just say Trevor Lawerence was able to play last week and it's this week he couldn't play in, and they find that out 2 days for the game. I think Notre Dame would pull off the upset. But now that Uiagalelei had a game under his belt, had some college football experience as a starting quarterback, I think Clemson is going to win this game on the ground game of Travis Etienne, as this is the toughest team Notre Dame's played so far this season. Clemson, on the other hand, they've played Miami this season. They had that one game where they had to grind it out and win the game. And that was last week against Boston College, 34-28. And this could be another one where they have to grind it out and win. I think Clemson wins this game 21-17. I think Travis Etienne is the difference maker in the game. You've got to remember, though, DJ Uiagalelei, he wasn't a 5-star quarterback for no reason. He is a 5-star quarterback for a reason. And I think he will play a factor in Clemson winning the game because also he has mobility as well. We saw the wheels he has against Boston College. So Clemson wins 21-17. And those are my Week 10 college football predictions. Comment your picks down below. Like, share, and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time.